It's a rematch in Mililani. This time, Republican Beth Fukumoto Chang is the incumbent, and her challenger is former State House Representative and Democrat Marilyn Lee. And West Oahu's 43rd District is another matchup between incumbent Republican Andria Tupola, who's being challenged by Democrat Stacelynn Eli. Fukumoto Chang versus Lee in the 36th House District, and Tupola versus Eli in the 43rd. This live presentation of Insights on PBS Hawaii starts now.
Aloha, welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Malia Maddock. This November marks the third time Republican incumbent Beth Fukumoto Chang and Democrat Marilyn Lee have shared a ballot. Both are vying for the chance to represent State House District 36, which includes Mililani and Mililani Mauka. And they're both here tonight to explore the issues important to the district. Then we'll hear from another Republican incumbent, Andria Tupola, and her opponent, Democrat Stacelynn Eli. Both want the chance to represent the Leeward Oahu district that includes Kalaeloa, Olina and Ma. We hope you'll participate during tonight's discussion. You can email, call, or tweet your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org. Don't forget to call in your questions early for the candidates for State House District 36, since it will be featured only during the first half of the program. Prior to tonight's show, there was a random drawing that determined the seating order and the order we will use throughout the program. Now to the candidates. Marilyn Lee is the Democratic candidate for State House District 36. Ms. Lee held that seat for 16 years from 1996 to 2012. She is currently the vice chair of the Mililani Neighborhood Board 25 and the Oahu Commissioner on the Commission on the Status of Women. Ms. Lee also spent 40 years as a registered nurse. Republican candidate Representative Beth Fukumoto Chang currently represents District 36, where she serves as House Minority Leader. Representative Fukumoto Chang was first elected to the State House in 2012 and currently serves on the House Committees on Health, Housing and Human Services, Consumer Protection and Commerce, and Legislative Management. Before we begin tonight's discussion with the candidates, let's take a look at the district's demographic breakdown.
State House District 36 covers the communities of Mililani and Mililani Mauka, where the total resident population is 28,199. The median age is 34.7 years. The racial breakout alone or in combination is 38% Caucasian, 71% Asian, and 21% Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander. The average household is made up of 3 persons, and there are more than 7,000 families living in this district. The median household income is $96,179. The median value of an owner-occupied housing unit is $570,400, and the median rental fee is $1,798.
Thank you both for joining us tonight. Ms. Lee, may I start with a question for you? This is a rematch between the two of you. What are you hoping is different this election for you?
Well, of course, I'm hoping to win, but I think there are issues that have come up since the last election, and that's one of the reasons I am running for office again. I think our town is changing. The demographics are changing. It's improving in many ways. Our school system is really great, but we have a lot of people struggling economically, and the cost of housing is very high. The cost of rentals is out of sight and almost not available. But I'm very concerned about a couple of things. One of the things that is the homeless situation, not so much in Mililani itself, but that in the total of Central Oahu, North Shore, and Waipahu area. There's no shelter between the North Shore and Waipahu, and we do see the occasional homeless person, and a lot of hidden homeless are there. The other thing I'm really concerned about, being a nurse for a long time, is the loss, possible loss of Wahiawa General Hospital. It's very, very important to our community. especially the loss of the emergency room would be really a terrible thing for the community.
So is the homeless issue and the loss of the hospital something that you feel could set you apart this time as a candidate or boost your candidacy?
Well, I think my expertise in healthcare is something that does set me apart from my opponent, and I have been a registered nurse for many, many years. I've also actually kept up with the profession. Recently did first aid for the bum dance at the Mililani Mauka and keep my CPR up to snuff. Do some shows on Kalaeloa regarding healthcare issues. Recently did one on food safety. So, you know, I think that, yes, the answer is yes.
Right. Representative Fukumoto Chang, do you see this rematch, if you will, as any different from 2 years ago?
I think every election is a little bit different. Certainly, the presidential race, the mayoral race, there are different factors than we've had in the past. But overall, I think the response that I'm getting is the same that I've been getting in every election. I think the biggest difference this year is that people know who I am when I come to their door. People are no longer concerned that I'm coming to sell Girl Scout cookies or whatever it is. People didn't recognize my face. Now people know when I walk up, and that's felt really good. That's a good difference.
Well, let's start with the homeless issue since it came up. Is this something that you are concerned about for your district?
Absolutely, and I actually would disagree that it's not necessarily a Mililani problem. As Marilyn mentioned, there's a lot of hidden homeless, but increasingly, as I've been walking door to door, people are raising concerns that they're having property theft. They're starting to be concerned that in some of the valleys around Mililani, there are homeless encampments, and we know that there are. Some of them have been cleaned out recently, but the bottom line is right now we're just shifting people around. It is something that we need to address. And a lot of that stems from the high cost of housing, and the high cost of housing is something that I've done a lot to work on in the last year and would hope to work on moving forward.
Right, Ms. Lee, affordable housing. What do you think needs to be done for the area?
Well, I think we need to have affordable housing. How we go about doing it is probably the real challenge. I think we need to look at a new way of building homes or building habitats. Perhaps things like sharing of cooking facilities, sharing of laundry facilities instead of having everybody living in their own little house. And, you know, we want to save the open land that's in the Mililani and Central Oahu area, and the land is very, very expensive. So I think that we need to look at a new way of building housing, and we certainly need to make sure that our young people are able to have a place to call their own, and not just doubled up with families like they are now.
Especially in Mililani, I think that's a place that we really agree. This year, one of the groups that I work with is the Hawaii Future Caucus. It's a bunch of young legislators under the age of 35, and we put together an affordable housing package that looked at things like shared living spaces, as well as building in areas like Kapalama, and looking at different tax incentives for developers around the rail. And we altogether put together about 6 bills, and that came from dealing with a bunch of different stakeholders over the course of a couple of years worth of work. So that's something that I'm looking forward to continue to move on, something that I think we agree on.
Yeah, I think that actually people don't, most of the action seems to other people to be in town, whereas, you know, Wahiawa has a lot of homeless, and many of the homeless in Wahiawa are actually people from Wahiawa. They're not people that came from another island. They're not people that came from the mainland. They are actually residents who aren't able to afford housing and who basically live the way they do because they can't live any other way.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned a structural change in terms of maybe shared facilities. Do you see something? I mean, we've talked about affordable housing, you know, for so many years. Is it going to take a drastic change in how we think about it?
Absolutely. I think if you look at most cities on the mainland, one of the things that they're talking about is most millennials, people my age, are more willing to live either without a second car, in a place that has a shared kitchen and shared storage spaces maybe. And that's affordable housing. That's housing that could help keep young people here. So again, like I actually did a bill for SROs, which basically is exactly what Marilyn's talking about, dormitory style housing, to allow it. It's not something we allow right now, but if we changed our building codes, we could. And I think it is going to take those kinds of drastic, innovative changes to see a difference.
You know, it could also talk about shared childcare too, because childcare is another big problem for people because, you know, to pay for nursery school or childcare takes up the bulk of somebody's salary. So somehow, you know, childcare being shared would be a wonderful thing. So
When
we
you
agree.
say when you say shared, what would you?
Oh, I would say that, you know, families could take turns being the mom at home, or, you know, we'd want some professional advice, of course, but, you know, I think a lot of people, like I was at Kipapa School last night for a dinner that they had to thank community partners, and they talked about Kipapa School being a school where it's the only Title I school in Mililani, but also 40% of the children have never been to preschool, and 60% are in free and reduced lunch. And a lot of those families really, you know, they're so busy working that they don't have time to, you know, to be with their children, to take care of their children for 8 hours a day. So, you know, there's a lot that could be done with shared housing and shared facilities.
A lot of people in this district spend a lot of time in their cars because of traffic. There are more projects to come and more houses being built and planned. I mean, can residents in your area take any more cars in front of them on the road?
No, I think that's part of the problem with any sort of attempt to build outside of the urban core. There are a couple of projects that are already in the works, but other than that, there are housing needs in places like Wahiawa, but I would be concerned with building more there, just because I think that for Mililani residents, putting any more cars on the road is a problem.
So you'd like to see them perhaps slow down some of the housing development in the area?
Absolutely. I think we need to be building in the urban core, especially because we have a commitment. The state has a commitment to rail now, and because of that, I think we need to be building along the rail line.
A question from a viewer that you seem to agree on so much. How are you different, Ms. Lee?
Oh, well, you know, I watching the legislative session this year, there were issues that I disagreed with.
Such as? Can you give us specifics?
Yeah, I think some of the things that happened were things that I would actually have spoken up about. For instance, the passage of an empty bill. You know, the passage of a lot of incomplete legislation, and the passage of bills that maybe weren't quite ready to be acted upon.
Such as?
Well, I would say that the bill that gave the A and B the ability to extend their water lease was a bill that I would have been very concerned about, because of the constitutional guarantee that we have that water rights are protected by the state for the benefit of the people. And somehow or other that was forgotten. And here we have a corporation who is given them 3 years more on their lease. I understand the employment problem and the people that have lost their jobs, but I was, you know, really concerned about that.
Let me give Representative a chance to, we can take it point by point.
Yeah.
This is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was something that came down to the wire, and there were a lot of decisions that needed to be made. At the end of the day, I came down on the side of what I believe to be jobs and making sure that the economy stayed afloat. One of the things A&B was talking about was diversifying agriculture, and if they couldn't guarantee that the water would remain with them for at least a certain period of time, they couldn't be sure that they could diversify agriculture, and that's such a huge need for us. And I felt like that land was so important that we're taking it out of operation now, but we need to make sure it gets into operation as quickly as possible to be able to save those jobs. And it certainly was a difficult decision, but that was a side I fell on.
Another bill that I would have had been in opposition to was Bill 1850, which was the bill that actually gave the company the right to collect taxes from the, well, either homeowners or vacation rentals. And I found that
Airbnb bill.
Airbnb, that's, yeah. I found that the governor's veto I agreed with. I think if the bill had been vetted a little more completely and there were guarantees about, you know, preventing fraud, then it would have been a good bill. But, you know, I felt like the legislature didn't look it completely. And there was at the very end of the legislature, there was a proposal for an amendment, but that never got done. And so it ends up being, vetoed. And well, luckily you guys didn't override it. But I think we have to be really careful about bills like that. It could have affected our community of Mililani. I mean, really, we're not near the beach, but we need to make sure that vacation rentals are legal, and that we're not just taking homes away from people who need them very badly. So,
Do you want a chance to respond?
Yeah, so I actually only got positive testimony on that measure. I think the 1 or 2 people that we have doing Airbnb in Mililani are renting out just one room in their home. Maybe they have a kid that went away to college and they have an extra room and they're occasionally renting it out. That is not necessarily the same thing as the problem that people are having in, say, Kalaeloa or out on the North Shore as vacation rentals. I think in a perfect scenario, one, it's a very complicated issue. In a perfect scenario, the city would actually be approving more vacation rentals, but then cracking down on the people that are doing them illegally, so that we do maybe have some, but we don't have as many as we have, because it is definitely taking away housing from local families. And because there's been no movement on the city side, one of the things that we thought on the state side was that at the very least, maybe we can even out the playing field by creating a tax on those units.
Did you want a chance to respond to that?
well, I certainly think that, there is merit in finding a way to bring in more revenue to the state, and that's not my objection. I think my objection is, again, it's an incomplete bill. It's not a bill that can stand alone without real concerns about fraud. So, so I as observing the session this year, I felt like that you, Beth, could have spoken up more about some of these bills. And I'm not adverse to standing up and when things go awry, to saying I don't like it. And so I think that maybe it's a matter of experience, feeling comfortable getting up and saying, I don't agree with the leadership. But
I don't think there are many people that would argue that I don't speak up when necessary. I think our last convention might have shown that.
Referring to some of the
the Republican convention, and I certainly have actually gotten in quite a bit of trouble for speaking my mind too often. So I think it maybe is more a matter of we have different concerns, different things.
You're referring, for viewers who might be wondering what you're talking about,
Yeah.
you're referring to the fact that some people were unhappy within the Republican Party that you felt you did not want to support.
Rather unhappy.
The presidential candidate of the Republican Party. All right.
I certainly agreed with your opinion.
Both agree on that. All right.
That doesn't help the person with the question.
No, we got a little controversy going there.
Okay.
I like it. Representative Wynn, you mentioned walking the district, and as I'm sure both of you are doing right now, do you hear a lot of anger about rail?
Oh, no, not a lot of anger. Well, I think people are frustrated with the costs. One of the things that I just keep hearing is that we just need to keep building, that they don't want us to stop. Sure, we have a lot of fiscal conservatives. Nobody likes a tax for no reason. But I think out in Mililani, we understand that the rail is an important project. And in a lot of cases, I think we're frustrated with a lot of East Honolulu people coming out and opposing a project that we know benefits us, but that might not benefit them.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
I definitely do not hear opposition to the rail while walking door to door.
I think I meant the problems that the project is
the
experiencing, and now
overcost.
And the whole project seems to be.
Well, stopping at Middle Street is the one thing that I continue to hear from people.
Yeah.
People
Right.
were furious about stopping at Middle Street, with good reason.
And people do have concerns about the cost overruns, and they have concerns that, when are we ever going to get to ride it?
Yeah.
Personally, if they get it to the airport, I'll be really happy, because it means I won't have to get anybody to drive me down there. But I think in general that over the years, both of our neighborhood boards have strongly supported rail. And I think people really understand that unless we have rail and it gets finished, we're going to have gridlock, especially with the downstream development that's going to happen very soon. Ho'opili's on the way. They had the groundbreaking for Ho'opili. Coal Ridge is going to be done, and we are going to have gridlock if we don't have an alternative. The other thing I would say is, that we need to have some incentives for people to use carpooling and go back to some of the vans that were made available by the state. Yeah.
Would both of you vote to get an extension of the tax for rail? Would you support that, an extension of the tax?
Well, before we do that, I think we need to make sure that the legislature gives back the 10% administrative fee that they take off the top of the rail tax. That is very, very, very important. Secondly, we need to make sure that the private sector gets involved in helping out with the stations and really gets involved in the transit-oriented development and perhaps puts their own money into it. And then I'm not adverse, the federal government just turned us down, but we can go back again. If at first you don't succeed, you try again.
Representative, would you support the extension of the tax?
Yeah, I did support it this year, and I think the one, to the earlier question that was asked, I think the one difference between Representative Lee and myself when we first ran against each other in 2012 was that I've taken a much stricter approach on raising taxes. I think she's got more of a record of increasing taxes on things like motor vehicle costs, gas taxes, that sort of thing. For me, I'm always very cautious about when we should raise taxes. That said, with the GET, this year I did vote to extend that tax for the 5 years. We suggested it, and that's because I think people in Mililani really do support the rail. All of that said, I would agree that we need to be more careful about spending the taxpayers' money on this project. I think that we should keep all options on the table, but federal funds should continue to be looked at. We do need to make sure that the city is taking control of their budget because this is their project and they should be managing it better. And lastly, different suggestions that we've had going back to the affordable housing bills that I introduced included things like value capture ideas to make sure that developers, if they are getting improvements on their lands, can also be contributing to the tax base that will help fund the rail.
Ms. Lee, let me give you a chance to respond on taxes. Do you feel like you
Back to the question of whether the rail tax should be extended. I think eventually it will need to be extended, but I think everything possible needs to be done first. I would like to make a correction. I never voted for a gas tax in the legislature. There was no gas tax raised.
There was a barrel tax increase.
But that wasn't the typical gas tax that you think of when you're filling up your tank. One of the reasons the governor, though, has suggested raising the gas tax and raising other kinds of things is because, there's a real problem with having money going into the highway fund, not only locally, but also nationally. And it's been years and years and years since the Congress has done anything about it.
All right, we've got a lot of questions coming in only a few minutes. This question actually is for you, Ms. Lee.
Yeah.
The last time you were the District 36 representative, you sponsored legislation to tax pensions. Will you support taxing pensions if you are elected? From Glenn and Mililani.
I definitely would not. I think we learned that it's a very unpopular issue. And actually, I get a pension, so why should I raise the tax on pensions?
All right. Next one from Ashley. I have a question for the representative and the challenger. You've both taken different positions on medical marijuana. Ms. Lee, can you explain why you oppose medical marijuana? And Representative, can you explain why you voted to allow dispensaries? Let me start with you.
Okay. Oh, we've only got a couple minutes, though.
Yeah. We'll have to keep it quick, but state your position.
Essentially, we have a little girl. It all comes down to this. So we have a little girl in our district that suffers from a seizure syndrome, and her family can't grow enough marijuana to be able to make sure she doesn't have seizures. It's the only thing that works for her. And we've had this medical marijuana law in the books for over a decade, but we have not given anybody legal access. So this little girl had no legal way to get something that stopped her seizures. And it really all comes down to that one issue, is making sure that people that actually need medical marijuana have clean access to it. I think that we have good checks in place to make sure that it's safe. And we worked very hard on that bill to make sure there were no holes.
All right, Ms. Lee.
I don't think I've ever taken a formal position in the last 4 years on medical marijuana. I have concerns about how the programs will be carried out. I do have a position on recreational marijuana, and I, at this point, would not vote for recreational marijuana. But I would agree that if it's needed medically, particularly in the case of pediatrics, I think that would be a valid use for it.
All right, from Manny Kano, what have you done or will do to support homestead communities in your district?
homestead communities in our districts? You know, I think making sure that we keep all the laws in place to make sure that things are adequately regulated, but also making sure that people have enough individual freedom.
Right. Ms. Lee?
I really don't have a position on that. I think that's probably not a big issue for our community.
Not a big issue.
Yeah.
All
yeah.
right. Next question. Are there any plans to build more schools in the area? The track, quote unquote, school system doesn't work for all families. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest accomplishments that we had this year, my sister, when they first built the track system, or built the middle school in Mililani, my sister was one of the first classes through. It makes it very difficult for families. We couldn't even go on family vacations. And that's been a problem since the school was built. This year, we were actually able to secure funding to build another building to make sure that the school can get off that track system. And that's the first progress that we've seen made in over a decade.
Ms. Lee?
Well, you know, I would agree that we not only need to make sure that the children are having a complete school year, and that's the reason for building this new building, is because the number of hours the children spend in school is not it doesn't compare to what is in the
They're
regular.
losing about 30 days.
Yeah, losing quite a bit. Yeah. So I would agree with that, and I think it's really good that we do that. But as far as the legislature's work on funding school buildings, I think it was a shock to me that Campbell High School was not funded. Their new classroom building, apparently now the DOE is coming forward and saying we're going to fund it, but a new school building was funded in Maui, which was not a new school. A new high school was funded in Maui that wasn't even needed for $37 million. So,
all right, we could probably keep talking about these issues, and we didn't get to go to all of the questions, but we have to wrap it up. Thank you both so much for joining us tonight.
Our pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we join the candidates for House District 43, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are two of the most polarizing presidential candidates in modern history. On Tuesday, September 27th, Frontline's acclaimed election year series, The Choice, returns, going behind the headlines to investigate what has shaped these two candidates, where they came from, how they lead, and why they want one of the most difficult jobs imaginable. From veteran Frontline filmmaker Michael Kirk, The Choice 2016 will investigate formative moments in Clinton and Trump's lives through interviews with those who know them best, providing in-depth, trustworthy reporting and powerful new insights at a moment when voters are being bombarded with conflicting partisan stories about each candidate.
She lacks the competence to lead our country.
This isn't reality television. This is actual reality.
Before America votes, in this historic election, a 2-hour special report that's less about what they say and more about who they are.
What was the one thing that everybody in America knew about Hillary Clinton? That she's tough.
This is a guy who says that if you hit me, I'm going to hit you back 10 times harder.
Frontline takes a hard side-by-side look at both candidates.
Life magazine profiles her. Suddenly, she is emblematic of her generation.
Practice politics is the art of making what appears to be impossible possible.
2 revealing stories.
Think of this 13-year-old kid who's growing up in a mansion with everything he could possibly want, but then all of a sudden, goodbye luxury, hello drill sergeant.
2 controversial candidates.
When I asked her, what was it about Bill Clinton that made you fall in love? And she said, he wasn't afraid of me.
Of impeachment against William Jefferson Clinton.
When he is impeached, she's mad as hell and hurt beyond belief, but it's Hillary who comes to the rescue.
Their lives.
His father introduced Donald to how to get things done inside the New York political process. His lawyer, who was Joe McCarthy's legal counsel during 1950s, taught Donald how to come out punching, how to use lawsuits like machine gun bullets.
Their struggles.
None of these emails should have been on any unclassified system.
This was the old Hillary. Secrecy, denial. I'm not going to let them know because they'll use it against me.
The Apprentice was designed to make him look like he was a Fortune 500 CEO. In the real world, his own business was blowing up around him.
And their comebacks.
There is an old money elite that has never accepted Donald. This is where his resentment of the elite comes from.
But he says to the bankers, I'm worth more to you alive than dead. So you have two choices. You can lose everything, or you can work with me and we'll work our way out of this.
The day that the Senate votes to acquit Bill Clinton, she is in the White House with maps of New York State laid out in front of her.
And she told me that was the first time in 53 years that I spoke with my own voice as my own political person.
From Frontline's award-winning political team.
I think in her heart of hearts, she really believes that she's all about doing good for others. And I think the facts bear her out. But another leap takes place, which means that nothing I do in the pursuit of helping others can be bad then.
The inside story of who they really are.
Donald Trump is running for president because he truly believes that he can help turn the nation around. More importantly, every critic, every detractor will have to bow down to President Trump.
No matter where you stand.
The voters are distrustful of both parties, whether it's Republicans or Democrats.
It's a choice between politics as we've known it and politics as it might be becoming.
Welcome back. We're now joined by the candidates for House District 43, which includes the areas of Nanakuli, Kalaeloa, Olina and Ma on Oahu's leeward side. Republican Representative Andria Tupola was first elected to the State House of Representatives in 2014 and currently is the State House Minority Floor Leader. Representative Tupola is a member of several committees, including Education, Health and Public Safety, and Transportation. Stacelynn Eli is the Democratic candidate for State House District 43. She is a former member of the Nanakuli Ma'ili Neighborhood Board and now serves as a board member for the Nanakuli High and Intermediate Performing Arts Center. She is currently studying economics and political science at UH West Oahu. We'll get to our discussion in just a moment, but we'd like to start by taking a look at this district's demographics.
Nearly 27,000 people live in State House District 43, and they reside in the West Oahu communities of Ewa Villages, Kalaeloa, Honokai Hale, Nanakai Gardens, Ko'olina, Kahe Point, Nanakuli, Lu'ulu'ule, and Ma'ili. The residents represent a young demographic with a median age of 30 years. The racial breakout alone or in combination is 38% Caucasian, 39% Asian, and 61% Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander. The average household size is 4 persons, and there are 5,000 families living in District 43. 19% of all persons and 15% of all families are living below the poverty level. The median household income is $68,000. The median value of an owner-occupied housing unit is $344,800, and the median rental fee is $1,700.
Thank you both for joining us. Representative Tupola, let's start with you. What would you like to accomplish if reelected?
I think that we've had a great 2 years of serving the community and starting a lot of initiatives that we haven't seen in a long time in our community. And I think for re-election, we definitely want to finish a lot of these initiatives that have been started. Bike paths, different community projects, renovating buildings. And so it's been really exciting, and I think a lot of people want to continue to see that change grow.
Ms. Eli, why are you running?
Well, I'm a fifth-generation resident of Nanakuli Hawaiian homelands, and being a long-time resident, born and raised, I've noticed, especially now, a lot of the issues that my community has been facing are decades old. Issues like transportation, homelessness, affordable housing, funding for education, and funding is a big issue in our community. I disagree with the representative, no disrespect, but the West Side, we've been taking care of ourselves for generations. Whenever there's a call or an ask for help from our community, be it an individual, a group, organization, our community is there. We know how to take care of each other. What we need is leadership at the legislature. We need someone that's going to deliver funding from our legislature to meet us halfway. So that's why I'm running. That's why I'm here.
Representative, do you feel that you've delivered funding?
Oh, yeah. I think as a collective, because really in the legislature, there's no one person that's pulling. Everyone's pulling together. In the Education Committee, everyone's pulling together. Our senator has pulled a lot for us. The representative that is adjacent to my district, she pulls a lot. So I feel like collectively that we've been doing for our district what we can. And I would totally agree that anytime there's a need in our community, everyone's there. And I think that that's what's made the difference, is that we've really been able to engage that partnership with the state funding as well as the community. Granted, we can always see more and we want to see more. But I think that it's the first time that a lot of people have been engaged and invited to participate in that process.
All right, we've already got a bunch of questions. Let's start with this. Ms. Eli, if elected, what would you do to handle the potentially conflicting needs of your constituents who live in Olina versus the needs of your constituents who live in Nanakuli?
I think, like I mentioned before, a lot of the issues that we have are decades long that can be addressed with proper funding. What I'd like to share is, we're very grateful for our senator and everything that she does for us. But when you look at the districts on either side of us, we have District 44. Their representative brought in $11 million into their district. We look at District 42, their representative brought in $5 million into their district. When we look at District 43, our district, we've gotten nothing.
All right, so I understand that on the terms of funding, that is what you feel is addressing this viewer's question.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the conflicting needs between the community in Ko'olina, or the different community needs, and Nanakuli, how would you balance those if elected?
I think it would be a simple balance. I think you need to recognize, the needs of both sides of, the communities. I think one of the most public issues is transportation, for example. So I think, while we have a contraflow that's, being conducted by the Department of Transportation, in the Nanakuli area, I think we also need to be focused on our H1 corridor. While the contraflow is great and they're taking care of that study and seeing the effects of it, we should also be looking at the corridor to see how we can alleviate that. Because I know that there's residents in the Ko'olina area who are trying to get home or just trying to get to the coastline. So I think that's one of the issues that I would take a look at.
Representative?
I think in Ko'olina they face different things, especially because they have a boat harbor. We've been doing a lot of work with them because they've had an increase of dolphin tours and other things that have been coming down the Waianae coast. So I think what probably the viewer is asking is how are the things different? Because in Ko'olina they don't have as many schools. So their issues are more based upon their housing. They do have a mother's group that gets together there that addresses some of the needs because they have a few preschools. So for them, some of it is schooling issues, whereas in the Nanakuli area, we have multiple schools. So for that, it's different because a lot of that is based around like after school activities needing more funding, more attention to the different programs, and of course, the transportation movement within the corridor of the Nanakuli area.
All right, let me give you this question from Ms. Silva in Nanakuli. I want to know what you have done, or what are your accomplishments for District 43? And why don't I add to that, your challenger brought up her opinion that surrounding districts had been able to secure more funding. How would you answer that?
I think that really when we're looking at funding, it comes in so many different ways. We've gotten so many different grants and donations from companies around the community that haven't ever been invited to donate. We're able to do a 3,000 square foot mural at the Nanakuli Food Giant to kind of improve that area. We did 5 cleanups. We've hauled 17,000 pounds of illegal dumping off the road, at least 500 tires off the road, as well as we organized 2 Young Women Prom events, 2 emergency preparedness fairs. In fact, we have one this Saturday at Nanakuli High School. We've also done 3 entrepreneurship conferences, and we've engaged the school in a back to school bash for the Nanakuli area. And this past summer, we did a whole renovation of the Barbers Point Elementary School. We helped to repaint and haul all of their old furniture, which they got new furniture this year, as well as some funding. The high school got funding at Nanakuli as well as Barbers Point Elementary for new aircon systems. So a lot of the DOE funding, and we got 2 grants through Aloha United Way to U.S. Vets Shelter as as well as Kahumana Farms, which has been helping with homelessness. So the quantity of funding, I think what she might be referring to is CIP projects. CIP projects are one, and we have received over 20,000 as far as different DOT improvements with My Kalaeloa, with the contraflow. All of that has come to our district in terms of funding, as well as homeless funding, DOE funding. This year was the first year that every school along the whole coast got free school lunch. And that was a partnership with USDA and our Department of Education, which that quantifiably is more than what we've gotten in the past for education and for school lunches, which is really important for the kids in our district.
All right, Ms. Eli, would you like to respond, or shall I move to the next viewer question?
I can, sure, I'd like to respond. I think that's great. You know, that's awesome projects that you've participated in. But like I mentioned before, our community has been doing this for a long time. I myself have participated in numerous beautification projects and, you know, trying to get funding to different organizations in our community. For example, we have the Nanakuli Performing Arts Center. You know, they need simple things like, you know, replacing lights. And I feel like, you know, even though we're appreciative of these grants and, you know, we're appreciative of our community coming together and doing their part, I think what we're looking for is for our legislature to do their part, for our representative to bring home money to help supplement, you know, the donations that are coming in from other organizations.
All right. Here's a follow-up question from Elizabeth. What have you done, or what will you do to support homestead communities in your district?
Well, that's a great question. First, I'd like to share that I'm actually a homestead resident. My family's been on Nanakuli homestead since the 1930s. And I think it's important when you're a legislature, especially one that holds the largest homelands in the state of Hawaii, to really understand the concerns and the issues that our beneficiaries face. And
what would you do specifically?
Specifically, I would advocate, you know, and continue to push for funding. I think what people don't understand is that, you know, from the time of its inception, the department has never been fully funded. Part of statehood, the conditions, you know, that were laid out was that the state would fulfill its obligation to the Native Hawaiian people by funding the department. Now, from statehood to now, that department has never been fully funded by the state legislature. So for me as a legislator, I would definitely support and push for funding.
Is that something that can be handled at the level of this position?
You know, I think the big issue that we had this year was with the Nelson case and the debate over how much the department should be funded. But also when attending these councils with the homestead presidents, another concern that a lot of homesteaders have is how the department is divvying this out, as well as how are the beneficiaries playing a role in being able to decide. One of the points that they brought up that was really interesting at this last homestead meeting was the fact that they feel like as beneficiaries, they should have more of a voice. They should be able to say where and how the money is divvied up in DHHL so that beneficiaries get more of the benefit rather than wondering why we have this long, you know, list, and a lot of them feel like they want more of a say. And I think that that can definitely be advocated through the legislature to DHHL in the amount of the funding that was distributed by the governor this year.
Let me go to some specific questions. This one is for you, Ms. Eli, from Dermot at Nanakuli Homestead. Since Stacelynn Eli lost the last election, what has she accomplished for the district and Nanakuli in particular?
I would say that I've accomplished, you know, working with the different community organizations and, you know, really trying to get out there and, you know, hear the concerns and needs of our community as well as act on it. You know, I've participated in numerous, projects as far as organizing beautification projects in our schools. So I think what I've been doing is trying to do some groundwork. You know, I'm limited, of course, because, you know, I'm not a legislator now. But still, I've been doing all that I can, even before, you know, the last election, you know, for years, from the time that I was young, it's been instilled in myself as well as the rest of my community members to give, which is the reason why I said when we're asked, you know, to help, to kokua, we do it.
All right, and this is specifically for you, Representative from Rodney. Your voting record shows you have missed many votes, and you have one of the worst attendance records out of the 51 representatives, missing 7 days this last session. How are you representing us when you aren't present? Is that true?
I don't think I'm the worst voting record. To be honest, there is a lot of legislators. We have to be at multiple hearings. So I would share that I'm on 6 different committees. So a lot of times we're running between hearings, trying to make sure that we get to votes here, we get to votes here. One of the things that I did as a representative was that I met with each department head outside of the hearings, because a lot of what we're going through at any given point in time, the health hearing, we'd hear 60 bills in 2 hours, then we get down on the floor and vote for 115 bills. What I made sure to do as a representative was always understand all the bills. I read them all myself. I made sure to meet with people who testified as well as department heads. And some of that meant that I had to sit outside of those hearings and meet with those people and ask those questions. And I would say that I voted on many, if not at least 90% of all the bills that came through. But I voted on it with the right conscience, knowing that I understood what the bills meant and that I heard both sides of the testifiers. A lot of these testifiers come out, they sacrifice time, some of them fly over from other islands, and I feel like they deserve more than 2 minutes to explain to us why we should listen to these needs. A lot of these bills affect people's families, and so I wish that really at the legislature we would take that time to really understand it, as opposed to ramming down bills, people always constantly complaining they didn't have time to testify, they didn't know such and such a bill came. And so I wish that we would give the time for the public to weigh in, because really that's what we want, right? We want the public to talk with us, help us to make the decisions, but it's so hard when there's so many bills coming through. So I would say that yes, I was at all of the hearings that I could be at, and if not, I was meeting with department heads and with testifiers to make sure that I understood my final votes. Those final votes can't be taken back.
All right, thank you. For both panelists, what ideas do you have to improve schools in the area? Leeward schools always get the young, inexperienced teachers. How do we turn that around? Ms. Eli.
I think we need to be more engaged, in not just hearing the needs of our community, but also hearing the needs of these teachers. Why is the turnover rate so high? How can we welcome them in? How can we get them to stay longer? Because as a public school graduate myself, I understand. I remember I spent one freshman physical science year. I had like 6 different teachers, and that's a problem. What can you learn when that's going on? And I think that what we need to do is to find a way to really to welcome our teachers to come in. And we also need to do better initiatives to try and keep our local teachers here as well. And I think we can do that by supporting, their needs as far as, raising, their wages. It's ridiculous right now. They give so much and they get paid so little.
All right, Representative.
I think for me, the main thing that I did with all the schools was meet with the principal. I wanted to hear what the principal was going through. I wanted them to explain to me maybe where they felt like they needed more assistance. For a lot of our principals, it was small things that I was able to do for them that would give a greater outcome so that they could focus on those teachers. We have awesome principals. And I think that for me, it's really important that for each school, it's different. What Maui'ili Elementary goes through with their truancy is not the same as what Nanakuli Elementary is going through, and it's not the same as the homeless issue that's going on in Barbers Point, because Barbers Point Elementary has 4 homeless shelters that kids come from there. So I think for each school, I think it's important to try to cater a package for that principal to see how you can help them, and that's what we've been kind of doing, is seeing where they're at and how we can help them get farther.
All right. This question from Dan in Nanakuli. The 2 candidates are from different parties. Where do each of them stand in regards to their national presidential candidate? Ms. Eli.
I am supporting Hillary Clinton. I'm supporting our nominee.
All right. Representative?
I support our nominee. I don't support his comments about immigrants, but I support our ticket.
You support Donald Trump. All right. Let's see. From Ronson Fox, traffic is a major issue for your area and the state. What are some solutions that you would support?
I think that we've seen a lot of solutions proposed. As you know, we just started a contraflow in August in our community. There's been a lot of controversies surrounding that. I appreciate DOT's efforts to pave that shoulder lane in Kunia that's been helping in the eastbound mornings. We appreciate the 2 lanes that are now allowed in the zipper lane. It seems like because of the quantity of housing and the boom in the population that we really need a leap right now. Because for us, a lot of those are just Band-Aid solutions. We need something bigger. We really do need a secondary access road into the coast. At this point, they are trying to do a turning lane, but there's a lot of delays in that project. And because of that project, that's why the DOT had to implement the contraflow, because of the bottleneck in the corridor. So we're working with DOT to try to push forward these things. But again, we really need larger solutions in order for us to kind of get ahead of this traffic issue.
Ms. Eli?
Well, our coastline, we've been battling traffic since I think the time, like I said, my kupuna have been battling traffic for decades. But I think right now the contraflow is a good temporary solution in Nanakuli. But in the meantime, we need to be addressing the corridor. We need to be finding other solutions to ease up the traffic and the congestion there. I mean, just to get to the coastline from town, I can personally vouch that it takes an hour and a half to 2 hours just to get to the coastline. So I think we really need to be looking at the corridor and seeing how we can free up traffic there.
All right. In terms of some of the further development that's coming in, that is job-generating development at the Atlantis resorts or further development at Olina. Do you see it as entirely positive, or do you see that balance between tourism and the local community as being something that needs to be sort of carefully managed?
I definitely think that people are screaming for the correct priority order. Because they want to see infrastructure. They want to make sure we have emergency services. We don't have enough emergency services on the coast, as well as now we don't have enough educational services. This is why Campbell High School is booming. This is why Kapolei High School is running over into Campbell. This is why we need another 6th grade classroom for Mililani Elementary. So I think that what people really want to see is that the priority order is addressed, that we're building communities and not just developments.
What do you think? I mean, Atlantis, this development, is it entirely positive for your community?
I think right now our community is, looking for career-driven jobs, better job opportunities, to really battle the cost of living. Now, I understand that, this development is going to create jobs, but I think we also need to be looking at, affordable housing and proper infrastructure, because before you build these things, you want to make sure you have the proper things in place.
Do you support the extension of the excise tax for rail?
I really think that they need to figure out every solution possible, and I wouldn't support extending the extension tax. The hard part about the GE tax, it's everyone. It's not just Oahu. And the rail is for Oahu, and I think that that's why the Outer Island people feel even more burdened with this project that is Oahu-centric, but everyone in the state is paying for it. So I would hope that the DOT or the city would extend as much federal help as they can get, as well as be as frugal as possible. And I know there's a lot going on with Kiewit dropping out, new director. So we're hoping that the city can manage this project, that we don't need to come to that question again at the legislature.
What about the thought of it ending at Middle Street?
I think the problem that people see with that is that we're halfway trying to build something that we hope is going to be helping people to commute, but a lot of people would never need that small stretch of rail. Really what we need is the students that go to UH, that's what we need. Students that aren't dropping off kids at school, that don't have multiple stops on the way to their job, and that would be the university students. So I think that that's what people really intended or wanted to support the rail initially for, was to alleviate that college traffic.
Although it feels as if we're sort of going away from that, if anything. Your thoughts?
Well, like the representative said, we're halfway through with rail. We're halfway there. And for me, I would say, we can't half-okole this project. We have to complete it. Now, as far as supporting, the extension, I think that's something that can't be taken off the table, but something that I would have to take a look at seriously and really look at, when the time comes, where we're at with the project. So I think that's the best answer I can give you.
All right. What about the issue of hot schools? Is there any progress being made on that for your area?
Yeah, actually, the DOE did pick a lot of our schools to be part of the 1,000 classrooms that were cooled. But in addition to that, there's been so much giving of the coast. Foster Realty, there's a lot of donations to the high school, to Barbara's point. And a lot of people, businesses have stepped up to donate, but we are looking, I saw a few progress issues at the high school because a lot of the electrical wiring is old. And so they needed to kind of step that up before they put in these aircon units. And so it's progressing, and I'm glad that our schools were chosen.
Zile?
I agree. I'm glad that our schools were chosen. I'm a proud graduate of Nanakuli High School, so I've experienced the heat in those classrooms. So I'm really glad that we're moving forward with the project.
Representative, given the chance, is there a question that you would like to ask your challenger, or a topic that you would like to engage with her on that you guys perhaps see differently?
Not that I know of, no.
Zile?
No.
So it seems as if both of you generally agree on what the main issues in your community are, with the exception, I believe, of the tax for rail. But you're seeing positive developments in your community. You see the main issue as funding, yes, if I understand correctly. Is this something you feel, if reelected, that you could bring more funding to the area?
Oh, definitely. I think every year as a new legislator, it gets stronger and stronger, your ability to maneuver in there, as well as make sure that you're vying for funds in all departments. Because CIP is one, but we really want funding from every portion, which means Department of Health, making sure that we bring in money to our hospitals, making sure we bring in money through DOE. So there's many marks of how to bring in that funding, and it has been coming into our district. And I think physically, we've seen it, and also we've felt the difference.
Is enough being done on affordable housing?
I would say we need to do more. We definitely need to do more. And the reason why I feel that way is because, you know, I've been walking my district, going door to door, and what I've found is that I have a pretty sizable population of kupuna who are living alone. And it's not because of, you know, choices of their own or even from their ohana, but it's because, you know, their children or their grandchildren have had to move to the mainland because they felt they couldn't survive here. They couldn't afford the cost of living, you know, the cost of owning a home. It seems so like impossible, especially with, you know, new reports coming out about the median home range, you know, 700,000 to 900,000. I mean, that's incredible. And I think we need to be doing more. You know, Hawaii is beautiful. It's a destination spot for many. But I think what we need to be working on as well is to bring our local people home, to make sure they stay home. I mean, I still have community members, you know, considering moving off island. I've been in Nanakuli my whole life, been on the coast my whole life. Most of my classmates, my friends, and my family that I grew up with, they're not there anymore.
Representative, really quickly, very briefly, do you think enough's being done in affordable housing?
No, and I definitely think that one of the best projects that we've seen on the coast is the self-help housing. It's been great for the people, it's building communities, and a lot of families from Waianae are benefiting from that.
Thank you both so much for joining us tonight. As we continue our coverage of election 2016 on next week's Insights, we'll hear from the two candidates vying for the District 7 seat on the Honolulu City Council. The district includes Kalihi, Mapunapuna, Salt Lake, Hickam, and Sand Island. We'll spend the second half of the show talking with the two candidates on the ballot for State House District 20, which includes the East Honolulu neighborhoods of St. Louis Heights, Palolo, and Kaimuki. That's on next week's Insights on PBS Hawaii. Thank you for watching tonight. I'm Malia Maddock. A hui ho.